What is going on, everybody? The original Mako back with some more last Epoch content. And once again, I said this in my runes and glyphs video, but I want to make more content on this game, and I'm going to try to start making more content on this game. It's a little bit difficult with my time being crunched right now with school, gunfire, and the job search since I'm graduating this winter, but I'm going to try, all right? I really like this game, and the full release is coming out soon. And anyways, before we get into it, be sure you check the links down below. As always, if you want to see me play this game live, you can check out the Twitch link down below. We have a ton of fun over there, a bunch of cool people. Also, the member screen, the link to the member page is down below, where you can become a member on YouTube today. There are 4 different tiers with fun, unique perks for each tier. And as you can see on screen, we have a list of our members here. Thank you guys so much for the extra support. It helps the channel out a ton, and I really, really appreciate it. So that being said, we are going to go ahead and get into this one because it might be slightly long. We'll see how it goes. But basically, we have an entire website here where we can build our perfect build or something close to it. So if you want to know the website, we've got lastepochtools.com. And then if you want to go to the planner part of it, it's /planner. I'll put the link in the description. Hopefully I remember to do that. But we're going to be going through every single part of the build. For some of the parts like the skill tree here, I'm going to go pretty quick and just kind of give an overview of some of the important nodes because I think it's very variable with what you want to do in the skill tree. But I'm going to be going through some of the more important ones and ones you want to kind of look towards. If you want in the future me to do builds slightly more detailed, let me know, and I will be absolutely down to do that. But let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going for Necromancer today. As you could probably tell by the title, that's the character I've been playing the most. That's my end game character right now, and yeah, we're going to talk about it. So you have to start in the Acolyte, the base class here. Between increased damage, Bone Aura, and Forbidden Knowledge, Bone Aura is the weakest one, I think. You really want minion damage, and you really want int, and built-in necrotic resistance is super nice. So I'm going to go ahead and put 3 there, 2 there, and then we unlock this second category here. And we've got Vitality, so personal health and minion health, minion attack speed, minion cast speed, and this bonus applies to players if our minion uses a skill within 10, in the past 10 seconds. And ward gained on nearby death, and the chance to gain ward is 10%. Now, this node right here is very important because you want unnatural preservation, because built-in necrotic resistance and poison resistance that you don't need on gear is super, super nice. But Mania of Mortality is, I don't want to say it's pointless because it's not pointless, but there's a node in the Necromancer tree that guarantees that you get ward when a minion dies. So you want to put 1 into this just so you make sure to unlock unnatural preservation down the road, but you probably only want to put 1 into that one. Between these two, health is always nice, but attack speed and cast speed is super, super useful. So I'm literally just going to put a few in there and then just keep. You're going to want to have Blood Aura and Forbidden Knowledge maxed at some point. So I'll put a couple more into Blood Aura. Once we get to the Summon Bone Golem tier, we've got the Ethereal Revenant, which when damage leaves you below half health, you summon one. It's a melee minion with decaying health. Damage scales with intelligence. You can do that every 15 seconds. And then Blood Pact, you deal increased damage, but you lose your max health each second if you have killed an enemy recently. I'm not a big fan of this one. Obviously, if you take Blood Pact, the next one reduces the health drain. But I don't know. Blood Pact just never. I wasn't a huge fan of using it when I put a skill point into it. So I would say just put a couple into the Revenant because you do want to have more things to summon. This is a Necromancer build. We're trying to summon stuff from the dead. That's what you want to be doing. So put a couple in there, and then once again, I'm going to go back to Blood Aura and finish it off. And now I'll be going back to Forbidden Knowledge a little bit. But once we get to the Spirit Plague tier, we've got the Unnatural Preservation, which is super useful. Putrid Demise, which poison resistance and a chance to poison nearby enemies on kill. And then you and your minions have increased health regen and effects that drain percentage of your health drain less. Once again, if I'm not putting much into here, This isn't a huge one for us. Health regen is nice, but it's not like a huge big deal. But you do want to get at least one node so you can unlock Veins of Power. So let's go ahead and put one into Stolen Vitality, one into Crimson Gluttony. And then Unnatural Preservation is going to be a big one because, once again, if we have built-in necrotic and poison resistance, that means it's less resistances we need to look for on gear. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 in there, and then we'll go back to Forbidden Knowledge and put one more up there. Okay, so now we're at level 20, and usually around somewhere between level 20 and 25 is when you unlock the Necromancer tree. So I'm going to just go ahead and say we're going to unlock it at 25, so I'll put 5 more points into this tree before we switch over to the Necromancer portion. We might come back to this Acolyte tree later to fill in some gaps like Forbidden Knowledge, Unnatural Preservation, but yeah. So we get to this tier, and we've got Minion Armor per level, which I haven't even unlocked yet, and then Eye of Damnation, which is increased necrotic damage, chance to damned an enemy, which is necrotic damage over time, and increased minion necrotic damage. You are going to have some minions doing some necrotic damage. This isn't bad. However, at least in the build that I used, it wasn't as useful. I didn't have a lot of necrotic damage going on, so I would put a point into it. Maybe consider 2 points. But then after that, I'm going to put 2 more into Dark Ritual, 1 more into Soul Aegis, because that's pretty good. Every single level, your minions get extra armor, which is, it just scales until you get to level 100, which is super nice. And then I am going to go ahead and put the last one into Forbidden Knowledge again. And now we've unlocked the last part of the tree, where Veins of Power is going to be one that we probably come back to and put a point in relatively soon. Not the biggest deal, because as you'll see with our build, physical damage isn't going to be the craziest thing in the world, but it is still going to be useful. But let's say we have the Necromancer tree unlocked now, so let's start putting some stuff in here. Grave Thorns, Risen Army, and Elixir of Hunger, all of these are good options. I'm, once again, big fan of damage and attack speed, so Risen Army is going to be my main one here. I'll put 3 in there, and then probably put at least 1 into Elixir of Hunger, because imbuing your minions with hunger is super useful. And also put 1 more there, because Damage Reflection is also very useful. Then we get Blood Armor and Cursed Blood, plus Reclamation of Souls, and this is the one I was talking about. So you have increased ward retention, and you are granted ward whenever one of your minions dies. So it's not a chance to grant ward, you are guaranteed to grant ward. So I'd put at least 2, maybe 3 in here, because as you get later into the game, your minions are going to be dying more and more. And then once again, put 1, maybe 2 in there, and then do I want to put some into... Yeah, I'll put a couple in here. Increased minion health is nice, but you don't have to like rush it or anything. And then with Life Drinker, I never used Life Drinker. Not a fan of it. If you want Soul Drinker, which is pretty good, then yeah, use it and get some to Soul Drinker. But this little tree right here was something that I never used in my build. So I'll put a couple into Blood Armor, just to increase some health regen, and then we will definitely put 1 into Mortal Tether, and then let's go ahead and go back and keep going for our Risen Army. Then once we get to this tree, Mark of Punishment is pretty decent to have a tier or 2 in. Aegis Fall is really good, and Ward Gain Chance whenever you use a minion skill is pretty good as well. But we're going to go ahead and get ourselves Aegis Fall. Probably going to put 3 in there if I'm being honest, and then we'll put 1 into the Wisp Weaver and 1 into Mark of Punishment before we move on to the next part of our tree. So this increases melee physical damage, bow damage, and just increased minion physical damage. Maximum number of skeletons. Excess healing is ward. Obviously, we're not doing that one. And then whenever one of your minions dies, you have a chance to summon a Vanguard from its corpse, a minion that deals melee damage using a spear. You're limited to 3. you want a lot of things to summon. So you want to do that, and you obviously want maximum number of skeletons. So let's go ahead and get ourselves the ability to unlock that. And after we do all that, we've got our next tier unlocked, which is Frantic Summons, Effigies, and Tyrant. Now, at this point, a Frantic Summons is obviously very, very good, but we're going to go backtracking a little bit because we want to have Risen Army at max, so we're going to max it. We also want to have a little bit more into Elixir of Hunger, so we're going to put a couple there, and then I'm going to go back to the Acolyte tree, put 1, maybe 2 into that one. I'm going to put 1 into Bone Aura, and then I'm going to max out Forbidden Knowledge. And now I'm done with this tree. Maybe go for some more resistances if I need it. In fact, yeah, I'll probably put at least 1 more into that. And then we can go back to the Necromancer tree and keep going with what we have unlocked here. So, Frantic Summons, really, really good. Effigies is pretty good as well. Tyrant, I never used this Tyrant or Tyrant tree of things here because reducing minion health seemed to be an issue, so I never went that way. But Frantic Summons, we're going to spam it. I'll put 3 in right now, and I'll put 2 into Effigies. And then River of Bones is just insane. You want a lot of crit strike chance. Crit strike chance is insane in the game. So I'm going to max this out right away. And then we are going to go to Heresy, which, once again, increased minion crit strike chance and intelligence. It's a phenomenal one. I'll put 3 in, and then we've got Blades of the Forlorn, crit multiplier, Veins of Malice, which gives you Frenzy. Whenever you cast a spell, you sacrifice some health, and your minions get Frenzy. You can do that every 10 seconds. Super useful. I'd probably try to max this out like as soon as possible, so we'll go ahead and max that out immediately. And now we have all of the nodes and everything unlocked. We've got 30 points left. I'm going to go ahead and get that up to 5. I'm going to max that. We are going to put 5 into Elixir of Hunger. We are going to probably do the fire damage and necrotic damage. Well, actually, let me do the Rotting Army for 3. Blades of the Forlorn for 5. And then I probably want at least, yeah, we'll go 3 here. And then we can get a lot of resistances from this. So I'd probably put at least 6 or 7. I'll put 6 in here and then give us 7 left to spare. Disciples of Necromancy isn't actually important for the build I'm going to show you. But if you're not using the maximum skeleton mage or the skeleton mage tree that I'm going to show, then you probably want to take this because it's more maximum skeletons. But I'm not going to be taking it. Then we're going to backtrack a little bit, and we are going to go with our last 7 points. I'm going to max out Dark Retribution. I am going to put at least, I'm probably going to put 3 into Unearthed Arms. And then we got 2 more points left. And I think the best way to use that is to either go for more Armor Shred, a little bit more total damage output, or some more ward and ward retention. I think, well, actually, you could go... Actually, there's a lot of different options. I'm going to put the last 2 into crit, honestly. Crit strike chance is just so important, so I'll put 2 more into crit. And that'll be it for our skill tree here. As you can see, we got a lot of stuff going on. We've got 18 resistances already in all of the elements. We've got a 70 in necrotic resistance, which means 75 is the max. So if we wanted to max it out, we could get to 75, but we really don't need to look for more necrotic resistance because we're in a pretty good spot with it. Poison's at 12, and then obviously we have no physical, no void, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Our minions are looking pretty beefy right now. A lot of crit multipliers, which is super, super good. And yeah, it's looking pretty decent so far. So next up, I'm not going to go through all of the skill trees. I will put what skills that I prefer. I've had a chance to use pretty much all of these, and have found a build that works really well for me. So, whoops. do I have to actually? Okay, Summon Skeleton is one that I use. In my second category, Bone Golem. Third, Skeletal Mage. And fourth, Transplant for a movement ability. And then for my basic attack, I use Hungering Souls. So basically in the skeleton tree, what I would do is just look for any way to get more maximum skeletons. And if you want to have a specific type of build, like let's say you want all bow enemies or all melee enemies, there's ways to do that in the tree. For my build, I went with all bow enemies. So if you go to, you do this left half of the tree, you get to Mightier Than the Sword. All of the skeleton warriors are removed from the pool, which means you can only summon bow minions, which can be really good for synergies. And I believe the other one, so this one removes archers from the pool if you want to have just melee minions, so you can really scale it to what you want. For the Bone Golem one, I can't recommend, just make sure you can get Tower of Bones maxed. Everything else is super up for interpretation and debate, but I don't think Tower of Bones is. I think that is a must if you are playing this using this skill. The more threat they generate, the more enemies focus on this instead of you, which is the entire point, is you want your minions soaking up damage and dealing damage. You're just kind of back there watching. Not really, but kind of. You don't want things hitting you. You want them hitting your minions. Next, for Skeletal Mage, personally, I went for the Archmage, which means you can only have one Skeletal Mage, which is why I didn't go for that node in the tree. However, I don't, I haven't messed around with every single type of build, so I don't know if that's the best one, as opposed to having like 3 or 4 Skeletal Mages, but it's worked really well for me, and I really enjoyed the Archmage. And as you can see, it can be any type of Skeletal Mage or Death Knight, so I went Archmage Death Knight to give it a necrotic attack, melee attack minion for my build. It worked really well for me, and that's just what I recommend. And then we got Transplant here. Nothing super specific for Transplant. The main reason I have Transplant in here is because it's a movement ability. You can dodge an attack immediately. You can get out of the way. You can do stuff really fast. And movement abilities, I think, are just invaluable in games like this. And then for my basic attack, I picked Hungering Souls. And the reason I did it is because of Reaper's Gaze. So your basic attack with a Necromancy build is not going to be doing much damage, like, at all. So with Reaper's Gaze, your souls will instantly kill enemies that are below a health threshold. Fantastic. It doesn't matter how much damage it's doing, as long as the enemy is below a threshold, they are going to instantly get sauced by the Reaper's Gaze, which is super useful for this type of build. So, a huge recommend for Hungering Souls Reaper's Gaze. All right, so I'm not going to go into the skill trees. I just wanted to kind of talk about them. Once again, if you want more in-depth stuff later, or for future builds, then let me know. I'd be glad. It's just going to make the videos go way longer, and they're already fairly long. So, let's go ahead and talk about gear, shall we? This is pretty important. So, for helmets, in terms of uniques, I haven't found. I've looked through a lot of the items in the database, all the items I have found in game, and I haven't found a unique helmet that has made me go, yes, this is really good for our minion build, so I'm going to do it. I haven't found it, but there are 2 basic helmets you can hunt for. We've got the Fiend Cowl, which if you're a lower level, this is the one you're going to want to be going for because it only requires level 23. And the Revenant Cowl, which is level 61, but it is much better in my opinion because it has increased minion damage, and a lot more armor versus increased minion health. So early game, Fiend Cowl. Later game, you probably want to go for Revenant Cowl. Some of the other options here, we've got Profane Mask, which is another, I don't think Burial Mask is very good, but Profane Mask is an option. You get a lot of armor and some adaptive spell damage for your minions, which is super convenient as well, depending on, if your minions are casting spells relatively often or not. For me, I just went for the increased minion damage, so let's go ahead and, I didn't mean to click directly on it. Let's go ahead and select the Revenant Cowl here. And then things you want to be looking for. We're also going to assume everything's at tier 5. For your prefixes, obviously anything, let's scroll all the way down. anything that increases the level of skills is really nice. I guess we can't have any of those on a helmet. So some of the better ones would be, oh yeah, we do have a couple. Never mind. So level of bone golem. You want to look for that. Level of bone golem is really, really useful. It's one of the better ones to have an increased level on. So let's just imagine we've got that on it. For our second prefix, we probably, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd probably have another increased level of something. However, there's not many great options here because we're not really using any of these other pieces of gear. So my biggest recommendation is, more often than not, it's pretty good to go crit strike chance. Once again, crit strike is phenomenal. So crit strike chance for skeletons and skeletal mages is going to give a lot of crit strike chance to like everything you have. So let's say we've got that on there as our second one. And then for suffix, this is where we go more defensive most of the time. I'm going to go ahead and start building this right away, but crit strike avoidance is huge, especially as you get later into the game. So crit strike avoidance is massive. And then 2, let's start getting our physical resistances up because we have no physical resistance right now. So let's look for physical. There it is. Physical resistance. Let's pop that on. Once again, you're not going to be able to get a perfectly rolled helmet, or you're not even going to be able to craft one, most likely, thanks to the forging potential. But these are the kind of things you want to look for in general. Obviously, resistances could be a little bit different depending on what you have, what you don't have, whatever. But in general, those are some of the things you'd like to look for. Amulets. So the big one for amulets is turquoise. Turquoise gives increased minion damage and increased minion crit strike chance. Obviously, that's extremely useful. In terms of uniques for amulets, there are there's one, which is, if I can find it, the Death Rattle. So this is a turquoise amulet, which means it gets the 5 to 35 minion damage and crit strike chance. It also gets crit strike multiplier for your minions. It gives you intelligence. Your minions take a little bit more damage, which should be fine. And then every time a minion dies, you regain health. So the Death Rattle is extremely good for your build. So we're going to go ahead and pop on the Death Rattle here. Next up for weapon, there is a unique weapon that I highly recommend. Well, actually, there's a couple, and it depends on what you're building. So usually you kind of want to try to build around a unique as opposed to finding uniques for your build, because it's easier to build around a unique than to find uniques for your build. Anyway, if you want to have like all bow minions and long range minions, and you're going to be doing a lot of bow damage, you're going to want to look for, hello? Oh, these are just the one-handed swords. I was very confused for a second. You're going to want to look for Reach of the Grave. It is a wand, gives you increased adaptive spell damage and lower spell mana. Your minions' spells and bow attacks deal increased damage. Your minions leech 10% of the damage dealt by their spells and bow attacks as health. 7 to 12% increased bow minion attack speed, and 7 to 12% increased minion cast speed. So obviously, if you're doing long range, this is the wand that I am currently using in my build. This is the one that you kind of want to be using. It's really, really useful, super good, and just really good for a minion build. There is also one, if you're doing a melee build, that's pretty good. I need to look for it. I forget exactly what type of weapon it is. There it is. Eric's Bones. So this one gives you some increased melee physical damage, increased stun chance, increased melee physical damage again, and then increased armor shred for you and your minions, which is really good. Increased armor shred for you and your minions, or chance to apply armor shred, and then increased armor shred. And then another big one is a 100% chance to summon Eric's Flesh when a hit leaves you below half health. So you already have a Reaper summoning, but now you could have another minion that lasts for 20 seconds and scales with intelligence as well. So once again, you get another minion out of this, which is super useful. And if you're doing, all of your minions are melee attackers, then this is going to be great. Even if they're not all melee attackers, this is still a really good mace to have. But I'm going to go ahead and pop on Reach of the Grave for our build here. Chest piece. Okay, once we get the chest piece, there is, if you are doing a melee build, there is one, the Doublet of Ono's Tool, because it gives minions a 40% chance to bleed on hit and increased bleed duration, which really doesn't have to be just melee builds. It could be any build, really. It's all of your minions. And then you get armor and health. For me, personally, even if I was to get this, unless I was able to craft it into a legendary and get some really good extra affixes on it, I'm not as big of a fan of this. I didn't go for a lot of bleed in the skill tree, so this isn't something that I personally would be using. So I'd be going for typically something like the Revenant robes can be decent. If you want a little bit of extra cold resistance, so you don't have to worry about it later, that's pretty good as well. And then honestly, other than that, there's nothing too specific for chest pieces. So let's go ahead and say we'll take the burial plate and we'll get the built-in cold resistance. Prefixes, once again, very similar things. You want to look for an increased level of skills that you can have. I believe Summon Skeleton. Okay, so the chest piece has the increased level for Summon Skeleton. So we'll pop that on, and then for prefix 2, a pretty good one to look for is increased +1 skeleton and increased skeleton damage, because you get an additional skeleton. So love to see that. And then suffixes, once again, we want to go defensive. So I'm going to probably pop on another physical resistance, potentially. And then go for suffix 2. We have built-in cold resistance now. One more crit strike avoidance is nice. Can I even put that on the chest piece? No, I can't. Okay, perfect. Then we'll go ahead and just do health. Increase our maximum health. Usually somewhere, well, probably want to be somewhere around like 1,500-ish for health. So we'll go ahead and save that. We're currently at 1,100, so we're definitely going to want a little bit more. Offhand catalysts. Now, this one is interesting. So there's a potential set you could do with offhand catalysts, and it is a shield, Cynethea's, because if you get both, the set bonus is you get +2 levels to all of your minion skills, which is ridiculous. And you get a lot of increased minion health and crit strike avoidance, which is good, but it's all defensive. And the other piece is a weapon, and it's not great for your minions. Once again, it's a lot of defensive stuff. So I wouldn't recommend it, but it is an option that you can do. What I recommend is finding yourself a... where is it? It's Fleshbound. And yes, the Fleshbound Tome, which is intelligence, minion damage, minion health. A lot of things that you want to see. So, Fleshbound Tome, on it, some pretty good things are, see if I can find, there we go, minion damage. Just straight up extra minion damage, which we haven't built on anything else yet. So, something we definitely want to be looking for. As well as... minion health isn't as big of a deal, really. Necrotic damage is a pretty solid option, as well as potentially cast speed. But I'd probably just go ahead and look for something like necrotic, if I can find our necrotic, or minion health. Honestly, either way, a lot of decent options. Fuck it, let's go minion health. Let's pop minion health on it. And then for suffixes, we'll do, let's get a little bit of dodge rating going. We definitely want to be able to dodge some attacks. So let's have some dodge rating on there. And then let's do, is there, void resistance, which we have not built yet, which is pretty important because there's a lot of void enemies. So let's hop Void Resistance on there. And now our resistances are looking pretty good. Physical's maxed out. Necrotic's great. Cold's pretty close. We need a little lightning and fire, a little more void, and then some more poison as well. But we'll get those. For rings, there are a couple of unique rings that are definitely viable for a minion build. First up, Arboreal Circuit. Movement speed, minion armor, movement speed for your minions, and a chance to summon an illusory tree when you're hit, which can happen every 15 seconds. Now, what is that? It summons a tree that distracts your opponents and lasts 8 seconds. So it takes away all of the attention from you and puts it onto this tree. That is humongous. Super, super useful ring to have. So I would highly recommend having that as a ring in your build. And the other ones, there are two more. One I think is a little bit better than the other, but we'll talk about both. So one is the Hollow Finger right here, which gives you increased minion damage, minion health, and crit strike chance. A couple of extra bonuses. You get an additional maximum skeleton, which is obviously great. And it's super good because, once again, you're getting the increased minion buffs as well as getting an extra minion, and every minion you get is really good. However, I don't think it's quite as good. It's close, but not quite as good as Ribbons of Blood. So, if you're using the Bone Golem and, Death Knight, even if you have a lot of archers, you're still going to have some melee minions. But the big thing with Ribbons of Blood is you get built-in fire resistance, nice. Increased fire damage, which you can make your bow minions do fire damage, which this increases that. You get increased health, great. Melee minion damage leached is health. Increased leech rate, melee damage for minions. But the big thing here is right at the bottom. Your minions cannot be crit. Late game, crits are going to be the thing, just the driving force behind everything dying. You, your minions, whatever. Crits are what hit. Crit hit, If your minions can't be crit, they are going to be dying significantly less often, which is good because you don't have to be summoning them as often. You can be focused on dodging. You can let your minions just farm through things. Making sure your minions can't be crit is, I think, really, really, really useful. So we'll go ahead and pop the Ribbons of Blood as our other ring, which once again does a lot of good work for our fire resistance as well. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and go to the belts. There's no unique belts that are like things that you really, really, really want to look for. There's some increased minion damage here from the Jungle Queen chaps. If you can find it, great. Once again, for me, since I have very few physical minions, it wasn't a huge deal for me. But it is definitely something that you can look for. But that's probably like the only one that you even want to consider. I mean, I don't know about any of the set ones. Actually, I didn't really look through too much of the set items for belts. But belts are very, very... There's not a lot of great things to get regardless. Once again, given the options, I would say probably the plated belt, or not the plated, the bronze belt, which is just a better version of the plated belt, is probably the best one you want to look for. And then prefixes and suffixes. Let's go ahead and pop on. Once again, there's not a lot of like crazy things here, but a little extra minion damage is always good, as well as some ward gain on potion use isn't bad if you have high ward retention. But instead, we're just going to do... Which one would I want here? Let's do... You know what? Let's do ward gain on potion use. I think that is actually pretty good for us. And then let's go to the suffixes, where once again, we are looking for a few things. We only have one bit of crit strike avoidance for us personally right now, so we'll pop on another tier of that. And for suffix 2, probably want to get something along the lines of the elemental resistances, because if we get that to tier 5 right about now, and we save that, our elemental resistances are pretty good. Fire's done, cold's done, physical's done, necrotic's done. Void, poison, and lightning are a little lacking, but we can fix that coming up soon. Next, we have gloves. Gloves are another one where there's not a lot of gloves that are like inherent. Like they don't have specific buffs for minions in their implicits. And there's also not a lot of great unique gloves is what I was going for. Keeper's Gloves does give you minion poison resistance, which is great, but it's not really that good at all. It's very specific, and a 10% chance to summon a swarm of bees on melee hit, but it's not that good. Yeah, in terms of uniques, there's nothing that's like crazy for a minion build. So definitely want to be looking more for a kind of just normal set of gloves. I was looking through these because some of these I haven't actually seen before. Yeah, okay, so scroll back up. Obviously, as you get higher in level, the better they get for the most part. Crusader's gauntlets are actually extremely useful because of the built-in void resistance. Outcasts, if you're a little low on necrotic resistance, could be useful as well. I'm gonna go ahead and take the I'm gonna go ahead and take the Crusaders, and then on the Crusaders, let's go ahead and see. I think there's some +1. Is there some +1s? There's not. Okay. So then you definitely just want to look for the typical stuff here, which would be melee damage, int. That's probably about it for these. So let's go, or minion damage and int. Let's go ahead and go intelligence for prefix 1. Minion damage for prefix 2. Potion health converted to ward you could do as well. It's not a bad option. Or ward gained on potion use. But we'll go ahead and go int and increase minion damage. And suffixes. Once again, we're trying to fix our resistances here. And we're we are well low on poison resistance right now. So let's go ahead and pop a poison resistance. Tier 5. And then for suffix 2, let's go ahead and finish up our void resistance, shall we? Oh, wait. Actually, our void resistance is going to be pretty close to being done with these gloves. So never mind. Let's go lightning resistance or health. Probably health, actually. We'll go health. And then we'll save. And ta-da! Once again, our resistances are looking very good now. Void's done. Physical's done. Necrotic's done. Poison's up there. Cold and fire are done. So poison and lightning are the last two that still have a little bit to go. But it's not too bad. And we're at close to 1,300 health, which also isn't too shabby. Next up, boots. Das Boots. Another situation where there's not a lot of uniques that are like very specifically good for a minion build. So you're going to want to look for just some basic boots, which don't have any built-in minion stuff on them. Movement speed is nice. You know, if you want some fire resistance or some cold resistance, there you go. Increased armor, ward retention, reduced duration of stuns. I'm going to go for the arcane boots here. Get a decent chunk of armor, or not a decent chunk. We get a little bit of armor, but we get the increased movement speed, and we get the ward retention. I think it's super good. So we're going to go ahead and go for the arcanes. Now, prefixes, there's not a lot of options for boots. So I usually would say go for something like minion dodge rating isn't bad, but since your minions already can't be crit, I'm not as worried about minions dying. So let's go ahead and go int for 1, because we scale with intelligence, and then we'll go vitality for 2, give us some extra health. And then for suffixes, you have a little bit more options here. I think our low end right now is the lightning resistance, so let's go ahead and pop a lightning resistance. And then a decent option at this high is hybrid health. You get increased added health and then percentage-based health. So if we do a hybrid health at tier 5, that's going to put us in a pretty decent spot. We get up to our 1,500 marker. Once again, our resistances are basically done now. We have really, really good resistances. And now we are going into our last one, which is Relics. Now, if you are doing a bow build, then there's absolutely a relic you need to look for, because it is, I mean, it doesn't get more perfect than this. Melvern's Writ, which is you get a crossbow mercenary, so you get a bow minion. You also get built-in resistances. But increased bow minion damage, increased bow minion critical strike chance, increased chance to find potions, and increased dexterity, which is, it's fine, whatever. But the minion crit strike chance, the bow minion, and the fact that you get just an additional bow minion, super, super useful, and something that's really, really good to have. So we'll pop it on, but we'll also look at some of the other options if you don't find this. Ruined Bones is really good. You get minion damage, minion speed, minion health. Damned Souls if you want some extra fire damage. A Homunculus Blood if you want a chance to bleed. Also Decaying Homunculus if you want necrotic minion damage as well. Those are all really, really good options, and probably the only ones I'd really go for outside of that unique if you're using bow minions. I think I've looked through. I don't think there's a crazy good one if you're using melee minions. So I would just look for some of those normal ones I just kind of mentioned. And yeah, that's I think it for our gear here. Once again, puts us in a good place for health. Our resistances are great. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get like perfect rolls on all these, but just some stuff to look for. Overall, pretty solid. Next, and last thing we're going to go through is some of the idols you want to look for. I'm not going to fully fill out this idol board, but once again, we'll talk about some of the idols that you're going to want to go for here. So at the top, a nice little 3-piece is pretty good. The Grand Bone Idol, it can have a lot of good things on it. Crit Strike for skeletons and skeleton mages. Obviously, that's fantastic. Let's go ahead and pop that on. And then for the suffix, something maybe a little extra poison resistance would be nice right now, actually. So a little bit of poison resistance, pop that on, save it. Gets our poison up to a decent spot. And then middle row, I like to have at least 1 4, usually like a 4 long one. So we'll do the Ornate. And then for prefix, I have this in my build right now, chance to fire 6 additional projectiles. It just gives you more chance to kill things that are at low health threshold, so I usually pop that on. And then over here, nothing super crazy. I mean, any shared damages are good because it's between you and your minions, but ward gained on kill is also pretty good. So let's go ward gained on kill. Save, great. Up here, we'll do a little 1x3. Whoops. A 1x3. On these, you can get health, which is really nice, as well as ward on potion use, and a chance to gain a ward on kill with Hungering Souls is pretty decent, honestly. But we'll go ahead and go health. And then here, we'll just add the crit strike. And then for any of the 2s, let's look at some of the 2s. For prefixes, there's not a lot of options at all. Health on kill is not bad. Vitality is pretty good. And stun duration isn't too bad either. Vitality is probably the one to look for. And then suffixes, once again, there's not a ton of options. But void resistance is a pretty decent one. Shared physical damage is pretty good. Shared necrotic damage is pretty good. And then a few more resistances if you need them. Let's go shared necrotic. Save it. And then for any of the 1x1s, you obviously have singularity, although it means you can't crit, which isn't great. But if you just go for the normal idol here, you can get dodge rating, which I think is pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and do dodge rating there. And then once again, almost the same as the other one. A lot of shared things, some good resistances. Let's go ahead and add some extra void resistance, save. And then you just kind of look for stuff like that to fill out the spots that you need. And there we go. There we have it. In general, that is kind of the build that I would recommend going for. Once again, if we can look at our minion stats here, we've got crazy high crit multiplier. Our crit chance is pretty high as well. I mean, our bow minions are critting 1 out of every 5 times, which is crazy, especially with the attack speed buff that they have. They're also hitting a lot harder, doing a lot extra damage. I mean, it's a really, really, really good damaging build. Even in my game, I obviously don't have like all of this stuff, but I do have a good chunk of this. I believe in my build, I've got the Reach of the Grave, I've got Ribbons of Blood, I've got Melvern's Writ. I don't have Death Rattle or a Boreal Circuit, but there are also good amulets and rings that you can use for minions. And yeah, it's just overall a really useful build, a really good build. I've had a ton of fun with it and a lot of success with it. And figured I'd make this just as some ideas for you guys. Once again, it's not going to be perfect, but this is a really fun way to play. And like I said, with these skills, I really like these 5. These 5 have worked super well for me. So there we go. There we have it. That is it for our build guide for the Necromancer. I'm sure there's a ton of ways to play this character. Once again, this is just kind of for some ideas or some cool options. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I love each and every one of your faces, and I will catch you all in the next video.